Welcome back to Your Average Investor. Today we're going to be talking about Virgin Galactic's ticker SPCE. I want to know right off the bat, how many shares of this do you guys own, if any? And are you thinking about buying down at these levels? This is all-time lows. Virgin Galactic just did a 20-for-1 reverse stock split. That means you're seeing $10 today. That's roughly the equivalent of 50 cents per share as it was trading a couple of days ago before the stock split. You can see in their FinViz, the float is incredibly tiny now, 18.83 million shares. And look at that short interest, 30% nearly. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, is you don't really have a lot of technicals to trade off of, right? These guys IPO'd via a SPAC vehicle, big old spike up, moving up and down, and then just kind of the slow march of death down. Very similar to AMC. I don't know, some other companies that similar time period, big old spike up and then march of death. GameStop bucked the trend recently for themselves, but space looks a lot like, we're just going down into oblivion here. And you've got this little bit of a channel the last few years that it's been trading in, and maybe the channel's narrowing up a little bit as well. So there's no real good place to say, like this is some good support, and this is, you could say probably a really strong resistance at this point would be, I would probably put it right here at $30 per share. So the new $30 per share, I would say that's going to be some resistance moving back up there. But the big thing is are these guys going to make it before they bankrupt, right? Before they bankrupt, close shop. I personally believe that they will, though I do not own any shares right now. What I do own is I've sold a significant number of very long dated puts. Which will put me in possession of a good number of shares if they get exercised in 2 years, which they might, but they might not. Who knows? 2 years is a long time for this to move back up. Here's what I'm looking at, though, right? They've got $38.90 in cash per share right now. The stock price is $10 per share. Obviously, they're using this cash to continue to finance operations. But they're sitting on a 4-to-1 cash to share ratio, or nearly so. That's incredibly high. Now, perhaps this didn't get adjusted accurately for the, well, actually, no, it did. I know it did because I looked at their investor relations page. Let's go here. Look at this. Cash and cash equivalents, $867 million. So we already know they have a $20 million float, or 20 million share float. So we're just going to go 867 million. Divided by 20 million. $43 per share. So it is a 4-to-1. They're sitting on a 4-to-1 cash to share ratio. Obviously, they're using that cash for operations. They're burning it relatively quickly. They only made $8 million in sales, and they had a loss of almost $500 million. So while that cash pile seems large and the cash to price ratio seems incredible, you have to keep in mind that these guys are burning money, and they're doing it pretty fast. And so $860 million, and that's basically a 2-year runway, right? If you extrapolate this out, they've got about 2 years left to turn this around. Here's why I like it, though. Virgin Galactic is not after the same crowd that SpaceX or Blue Origin, I think is Jeff Bezos' space company. These guys are 100% focused on commercial operations. Now, they are taking some government contracts right now for researchers to go up and do some research, and I think that's a smart thing to do for them to shore up some cash. But they are primarily targeting the consumer industry, and by consumer in this case, I mean the ultra high net worth or high net worth consumer, because a single ticket for Virgin Galactic right now is $450,000 and requires a $150,000 deposit. So you're spending almost half a milli for a one-time trip to space, and this isn't something that ordinary average people are going to do, right? They're going to go buy a house instead if they had 500K, or maybe they'll invest it. They'll put some for a down payment, invest the rest if they're smart. So Virgin Galactic, though, they're not targeting the average ordinary person. They're not targeting the person that would be hurt in the case of a strong economic recession. They're targeting the ultra wealthy, who they're just going to do what they want anyway because they have more than enough cash to throw around. Like, if I'm, I don't know, like, if I'm Morgan Freeman, like, what's Morgan Freeman's net worth? Estimated $250 million, right? If I'm Morgan Freeman, I've got an estimated net worth of 250 mil. I'm assuming that's been invested well and is generating me money. Let's just be really conservative. Say he has 250 mil, providing him with 5% per year. He's making 12 million a year in interest. That's really conservative. So he's making 12 million a year in interest. For him to throw 500,000 of that at a space flight, no big deal, right? No big deal at all. So that's the kind of clientele that these guys are going after. Now, that being said, they are not making a lot of money right now. They've done 8.5 million in sales in the last 12 months. I'll just do some really easy math. 8.5 million divided by 450,000. They've sold roughly 18 tickets on their space flights. And I think they've also, some of those have been government contracts. That might not be exact math. But obviously, they are very, very early in their stage. Now, what's exciting, though, is they have a lot of assets as well. Obviously, they have a lot of proprietary technology. I don't know if Spaceport America is finished yet, but I know they're working on Spaceport America. So they've got their space fleet, Spaceport America. Let's actually see if this is done or if it tells us anything about it here. All right, Spaceport America. No, this is just telling you about what you do when you get there if you want to be an astronaut. So I think it's done then. Look at that. That's such a cool thing right there. Spaceport America in New Mexico. And of course they've got everything else. So they've got a lot of non-cash assets as well. The problem is they've got to do this. They've got to cross the chasm. And when they cross the chasm, they're not crossing the chasm with... So this, think about, if you haven't read the book, it's a great book. The principle is simply this. Anytime there's a new technology, for people that will be using that technology, they get divided into 5 groups, and there's a gap. You have the innovators. These are the people like Richard Branson himself, right? So if you go to the page here, here's Richard Branson. He's the owner, the founder of Virgin Galactic, along with Virgin Airlines. He's made a number of successful companies. And then you have the early adopters. These are the people that are on the bleeding edge of technology. These were the people that were getting into Bitcoin back in 2014, 2015, right before it became a mainstream thing that everybody knows about. You have that. Then you have the chasm. This is the gap, the painful gap you have to cross to get to the early majority, then finally late majority laggards. You know, these are the people that still today don't have email. They just refuse to get email and things like that. But the thing with Virgin Galactic is I believe they're still in the innovator stage. I don't even think they've gone to the early adopters. Number one, this bell curve, this represents a bell curve of ultra high net worth people. This is not a bell curve of everybody. Like, when we get to the late majority, it doesn't mean that the average person is going to be taking a flight to space. It means that celebrities will be taking flights and rich people will be taking flights to space regularly. And maybe they do the same thing that Tesla does, where they over time try to build cheaper and cheaper ways to get people out there, and so maybe eventually. But as of right now, they've still got to move into the early adopters. The reason I don't think they're there yet is if you look at this is their astronaut page. This shows you all the people that have taken a flight. Richard Branson, all these people. You can go through the list. You're not going to recognize any of these names. I didn't, at least. Maybe you'll recognize some, but like Ken Baxter, who's this dude? I don't know. AKA Rocket Man. He's a real estate entrepreneur, right? Cool. He is phenomenally wealthy and successful in what he's done, but nobody knows his name. Now, imagine what happens, though. Just imagine what happens. You can scroll to the end. You won't recognize any of them. Imagine what happens when all of a sudden you get an image here of like Oprah, Dwayne Johnson, Will Smith, Brad Pitt, Robert Downey Jr., Morgan Freeman, right? Here's where I think it gets really cool. Imagine, this is what I think Richard Branson should do. He should do everything in his power to get Morgan Freeman on one of his spaceships, and imagine Morgan Freeman narrating the entire experience while he's on the ship in his own. This is Morgan Freeman and the March of the Penguins, and I'm going to narrate this space experience, and look at that. Right? The iconic Morgan Freeman voice narrating his trip into space. and how cool that would be. And then imagine, you get Kim Kardashian and Beyonce, and all of a sudden now it becomes a keeping up with the Joneses. You've got to do it because the other celebrity did it, and your people are going to be expecting it of you. That is where they start getting into the early adopters, and then as they get enough of those celebrities, eventually they cross the chasm, and then it's like, if you're a celebrity, if you're an ultra wealthy person, you just have to do it. So that's why I think they're still in the innovator stage, which is a scary stage to be in because you're not making a lot of money, right? Like this is I mean, $8 million a year is a lot of money by itself, but when you put it up against $444 million in net losses, that's not a lot of money at all. And so it's a scary position to be in. They've got 2 years runway. They've got to somehow get enough tickets sold and have the capacity to fulfill those tickets that they can cross the chasm and launch into space, right? So the average, I think what they said is that average spaceship is going to take 6 passengers twice per week at full capacity, so 12 a week, and be operating 52 weeks a year. And so that's 624 trips. And then if you multiply that by 450,000, you can see that generates $280 million in revenue per spaceship per year. Now that's revenue, that's top line, right? So it doesn't include expenses. But if top line is 280, let's just say that their margins on it are something like 30%. I don't know what it would be. But $84 million for a single spaceship. That's cool. Now we've got a little bit of metrics, right? They're losing 440. That means they need roughly 5 of these. 5.5, I guess, 6 of them. And then at full capacity, and then they're break even. Except for, I believe, a lot of their expenses. Let me just double check this. But I think a lot of their current expenses are in R&D right now. I don't remember where I saw that. Here we go. Spaceline operations were only $23 million in the first quarter. R&D were $59 million, and then SG&A was $28 million. So, I don't know. Like maybe as they go, R&D goes significantly lower as a percentage of overall revenue. But in general, we can see what they're going to need to do. So let's just say they need to. So if they want to overcome a loss of $444 million, and they're selling at a ticket price here, 1,000 space flights is going to get that. Well, it's not going to be accurate because their expenses will go up. I would say probably 2,000, maybe 3,000 space flights per year. Somewhere in there is going to be my guess of where their break even is at. And so they've got 2 years to get to where they can do that. And quite frankly, that's why I think the stock is so low, even though they've got so much cash on hand right now. Their cash to share ratio is so good. I think it's going to be an interesting turnaround play personally. I think that space is here to stay. I think that Richard Branson has a successful track record from his other companies, Virgin Galactic, Virgin Records, etc. And I think this is like his life accumulation here in Virgin Galactic. He wants to see this through and see it as a success. Like this wasn't just a project for him so he could get to space himself. So that's my thoughts on it. Love to know your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button and we'll catch you next time.